Hello everyone, I'm Amie. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be diving into my all-time bookish favorites. Many thanks to Jackie from the Reading Wordsmith for tagging me and challenging me because I absolutely love a challenge or a quiz. So let's get into it. The first prompt says, what are 5 books that define your reading tastes? Number 1 on my list is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I probably was about 15 or 16 when I first read this book. And this is me 10 years later telling you that this was probably one of the most defining books of my entire life. Half of a Yellow Sun follows a group of people as they navigate the civil war that took place in Nigeria in the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. The reason why this book had such a profound effect on me at that time and still is because I don't think I had ever spoken about the civil war in Nigeria, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that this book exists, because at the time I should have been more aware of what the civil war was and the impact that it had on Nigerians, but unfortunately it's just not something that I was taught in school. So for this book to be my introduction to that was quite life altering for me, not to sound dramatic, but it really was, because it made me angry that I didn't have any sort of understanding and nobody had ever talked about it. And it was almost like something that hadn't happened prior to me reading this book. But also, I think it really put into perspective what war is like and how devastating it is. And it became very clear to me that it's so important for us as a society to avoid war, because the impact that it has is so great and not even something that you can quantify. Wars destroy lives, and it wasn't until I read that book that I understood, which is a massive privilege, because so many people understand war because it's something that they have gone through. And I imagine that that is a very devastating place to be. So for my understanding of war to be from watching it happen to other people or reading about it, it's a very privileged thing to say. And that privilege is not something that I take for granted. I don't feel like Nigerians speak enough about the impact of that war. And it's probably from a place of PTSD, I'm guessing. These are only things that I'm surmising. I feel like it was the very first time that I saw myself in a character in a book. I had been reading books, but I had never put myself in a place of a character based on pre-existing characteristics that I know of myself to be true till I read that book. And it was very interesting and definitely shaped my life and my tastes. And it's a book that I don't think I will ever forget. It's very strange to say that it's one of my favorite books of all time, just because of the subject matter that it tackles. But I think it tackles subject matter in a way that educates and informs, but also it makes you empathize with people that are maybe different from you, or people that you had never particularly imagined seeing life through their eyes and their perspectives. I think it made me confront the realities of humans and what it is that we can do from places of desperation, or when we feel powerless, or when life is confusing, and sometimes even the depths of human depravity. And it is a book that I think everybody needs to read, but especially if you're Nigerian, I think it's so important because it teaches a part of our history that I feel like sometimes is missing from conversation. And we need to find a way to preserve these things, mostly so that we just don't repeat them. The second book on my list is We Could Be So Good by Sebastian. I've talked about this book so much since I started this channel, but it is a book that follows Nick and Andy. They come from completely different walks of life. They're 2 men living in the 1950s in New York, and they meet at work, they become best friends, and they eventually fall in love. And again, much like Half of a Yellow Sun, when I talk about books that defined my life and I talk about books that changed how I see the world, I think this is definitely one of them. As somebody who didn't really grow up seeing men in relationships, or even didn't really grow up conceptualizing that as an idea, it's been lovely to read a book about 2 men falling in love, because I think it's important. For one, it's representative of people's realities. I think books like these are very important, especially if you are somebody who does not agree with how people in the LGBTQ LGBTQ plus community are treated, the way that they are targeted, the way the world attaches certain stigma to them without even giving them a chance to tell you who they are. When people talk about how romance is a sort of like flimsy genre and it's not important, I laugh, because romance has given me so much in terms of how I see people that I have never met, people that I have never walked through life as, because we don't come from the same place, we don't share the same experiences. And this book really changed my life because, for one, their relationship is relationship goals. People talk about that all the time, but it's hard to say somebody's relationship goals without having insight into their relationship. But the thing about books is that they do give us insight into certain kinds of relationships, even though these are not technically real people. And Nick and Andy's relationship is, for me, the embodiment of relationship goals. I absolutely just love them together. I loved what they represented. You know, when you read books like this, you become aware of your own biases. They make me seek out ways to be a better person, to be a better ally, to show up for people in ways I didn't even think I could show up for people, because I just never thought about these issues. But that's the beauty of books, is that they give you insight into things that you may not have encountered yourself without reading. And I think that's what a book like We Could Be So Good has done. It's a book that defines my taste, because it's just so beautiful. It's so weird to say that I feel like a better person after reading, but it is the truth. And I wonder if it's something else that other people relate to. It'd be interesting to see. The next book that defines my reading taste would be Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. When I first got back into reading, it's one of the very first books that I've read as part of the Brown Sisters trilogy, which features a group of Black British sisters. I quickly fell in love with them as sisters because they reminded me a lot of me and my sisters. So there was a relational aspect there. But also, I loved each and every one of their individual stories. Dani's story just happened to be my favorite because I relate heavily to Dani. Her characteristics, the things that make her her, the things that make her tick, her fears, her worries. And also because Zaf is my favorite of the guys. They're all great guys, but I think Zaf is definitely my favorite, and Dani's my favorite of the sisters. I think also it was nice to read a book about grief and sort of the effects that grief can have on you that you may not exactly expect. I will talk more about why Dani is my favorite later on, because there's another prompt in which I can go into detail. But I think the book had a good balance of being fun and explorative, but also very grounding and based in reality. Like, they didn't shy away from certain undesirable aspects of what it meant to be that couple in that era with those characteristics. But also, it didn't feel like a struggle book. It still felt, you know, aspirational and something that you could look up to, and funny, and I just loved it so much. Another book that I think defines my reading taste, especially in terms of fantasy, is Legendborn by Tracy Dion. It follows this girl called Bree. Her mother has passed on, and she finds out that there's like an entire secret society that she was not aware of, who may or may not be behind her mother's death. Basically, there is more to what happened than meets the eye. I've only read the first 2 books in series. The third book came out a while ago and I haven't read it yet. I just had a lot going on, but I will read it when I'm in a better state of mind. I don't even think I knew very much about King Arthur, so it was nice to delve into that. I think it is a very good YA book, because I find that I don't really enjoy a lot of YA, mostly because I'm an adult now and I really want to read books about other adults. But I think this one has a good balance of, you realize that this is actually a very young girl and she is not an adult, but there is a way that the world and society treats teenage girls. There's a sort of lack of respect that they are afforded. Sometimes they're treated as these hysterical, unreasonable things that are not really seen as people, without delving into what we as a society contribute to why they feel the way they do, why they act the way they do. You just put so much blame on them without thinking about how much of their behavior is reactionary to the world around them. And I think with Legendborn, you can tell that Tracy has a respect for Bree. And I feel like sometimes we don't afford children the respect that they deserve, because I think that children should be afforded respect right from the day that they are born. But I find that sometimes as a society we treat children with such a lack of respect, and we only reserve that respect for when they grow. And what I really like about Legendborn is that it shows how you can respect people of a certain age and how she doesn't have to necessarily be an adult to be seen as a whole person who has a wide range of emotions, who is going to make mistakes, but at the same time is capable of such good and capable of making decisions that as an adult you can look up to. And I think that for me is the crux of why I love the book so much. The last book that I wanted to highlight is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. The primary reason why I wanted to highlight this book in particular is because it tackles subject matter that I have been thinking about. It is a great book on its own. It's fantastic. It is so well written, and it tackles subject matter that has always been very relevant, but now as a society that we're just talking about. So it follows a couple that is struggling to conceive a child. They're married and want to have children, but there is also a lot of outside pressure on them to have a child, and they're struggling. And I think that while it is a story primarily about infertility, I think there is a part of it that tackles discussions about how we treat women in society and how we put pressure on people to have children right out of the gate. You do not think about whether or not they want children. You don't think about the impact those children could have. You don't think about the path that they might have to take to have children. And I think also it talks about when the pressure that is mounted on you is so much that it causes you to act out of character, it causes you to be desperate enough to do things that are very questionable. The most powerful thing about the story is the nuance that it offers you. At what point are we as a society going to answer to how we treat people? Women especially, because they tend to bear the brunt. When a couple is unable to conceive, usually people will automatically assume it's the woman. It's a problem with her. Either she was promiscuous or she's not doing what she's supposed to do as a woman, and then you make her feel less than, without thinking of the fact that it actually might be the man. And even if it is the man, it's the same for them, where you kind of treat people who can't conceive or people who are struggling with fertility as subhuman. You think that you're helping them by constantly questioning why they don't have children, without realizing that they may not want children, but worse off is when they want them but they can't have them. And they do all these things that when you isolate them from the entire story, you might think, why are you doing these things? And these things are bad, without realizing that these are all the effects of what we do to people. How you tie so much self-worth that you almost then extract the humanity from the equation because you're pressing so much. I have always been quite sensitive to, I suppose, the expectations that society has of women. But I think the book made me properly confront how problematic a lot of our behaviors are as a society, and that is the reason why I think it defines my taste. Next prompt is, what are some books you were obsessed with in different eras of life? When I was a child, I loved Enid Blyton. I loved African children books that they would give us at school. So Without a Silver Spoon, Bola and the Kidnapper, Izzy Goes to School. I loved all those books growing up. Those are the ones that I know off the top of my head. God, I really need to delve into the books that made my childhood. And I loved all the Disney books. Anything Disney I would read. And I don't know if an encyclopedia counts as a book, but when I was a child, I was obsessed with encyclopedias. So whether they came in the shape of a book or they came in the shape of a computer game. I don't know if anybody remembers, but from my childhood, I remember this software called Encarta, and Encarta Kids in particular, and I was obsessed. Anytime I was given time on the family computer, I would always be on Encarta Kids playing all the quizzes because I was just so obsessed with encyclopedias and atlases and just that acquisition of knowledge about other places and things that I just never had been able to sort of conceptualize in my mind. After that, I stopped reading for a while, and then I started reading again when I was about 15. I was obsessed with all the teenage angsty books. So the Fallen series by Lauren Kate, the Vampire Academy series by Richelle Mead, the Covenant series by Jennifer L. Armentrout, I was obsessed with. My Love Lies Bleeding, I think that was Alexandra Harvey. I loved supernatural books. I never read the really popular books. I wasn't interested in Twilight. I was just mostly into those vampire books with kick-ass female leads. Then I stopped reading again after secondary school, and then when I started uni, I started again. By then I was reading extremely popular books, so things like Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation and The Unhoneymooners. I wouldn't say I was necessarily obsessed with them, but I read them because when I first discovered BookTube, that was what everybody was reading at the time. I was obsessed with reading the books people were specifically talking about and the books that were getting massive amounts of views online. And then now, anything Cat Sebastian, anything JJ Mulder, I am obsessed. And Talia Hibbert, I'm obsessed with their genre of what they're doing at the moment. Next question is, what are your favorite genres? Romance is definitely top of my list, but also fantasy as well. I love those two genres again because they create the escape that I'm looking for when I delve into a story. There is something quite grounding about both of them in a world that's increasingly feels unsteady, and I feel like every day that I exist I have more questions than answers. And so when I read, it's nice to be able to have a bit of reprieve from a sort of mindfuck that is the world and the labyrinth that is my brain. Next question is, what are some of your favorite authors? Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, despite the fact that Dream Count disappointed me. Talia Hibbert, Cat Sebastian, JJ Mulder. I would say those four are definitely my top faves at the moment. I would say emerging, but I haven't read enough of their works to actually figure out if they're favorites of mine or not. I would say probably Logan Sage Adams, C.M. Daniels. I've read books from them recently that I've really loved, and I felt really lucky to have discovered them. Tracy Dion, Lee Bardugo. I think those authors provide what it is that I'm looking for, whether or not I'm looking for healthy relationship dynamics or I'm looking for people who have overcome very difficult things to find what they deserve in the end, people who are capable of analyzing their own faults and working to better themselves, people who are telling fictional stories based very much on reality, who are not afraid to go there with certain subject matter, who are pushing the needle of what it means to be a storyteller, people who are maybe not doing the most popular thing but are clearly doing things that they love and it's translating into the words that they are producing, and people who clearly have a love for what it is that they're doing. I could be wrong because I don't know any of these authors, but when I read their books, I do get the sense that they were meant to be writing books. And I think every time I read a book by them, it becomes clearer and clearer. So yeah, I think for now, those are probably my favorite authors. Next question is, what are your favorite forms of reading? I would say it's definitely reading on my phone, so via the Kindle app, which I know definitely increases your screen time, but I think for me it is the most convenient thing, especially because I work full time and most of the time I spend on the road getting to and from work. So it's just very convenient for me to have it on my phone. I don't have to carry a book around. I don't have to remember that I should not forget my book in certain places. I always have my headphones so I can listen. Audiobooks are second in command. I really enjoy reading on my phone and also audiobooks at the moment because it is the most convenient thing for me. And in my quest to read, I am looking for convenience because this is very much a hobby, and hobbies are supposed to make your life easier and more bearable. I hope that I can get to a place where I go back to reading physical books because I started with physical books and I feel bad about the fact that I can no longer read a physical book as I once used to. Next question is, who are some of your favorite book characters? And I thought it might be quite nice to attempt to categorize them, if you will. My first category would probably be the women I look up to for all sorts of reasons. I would say Dani Brown from Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I would say Omelogo from Dream Count. I would say Nora from Book Lovers. And I would say Zoya and Inej from Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows trilogy by Lee Bardugo. I'll start with Dani Brown. With Dani Brown, I have never related more to a character than I have with Dani. She and I are very similar in both ways that I am proud to say. Like, she is ambitious, she is a hard worker, she is unapologetic about the fact that she wants to be the best in her field. She is one of those people that strives to be disgustingly educated. She is strong-willed, she knows her mind, she is not embarrassed about things about herself and her state of being a woman that she shouldn't be embarrassed about, even though society has told us that we should. But also, there are parts of her that she kind of shies away from romantic love. She basically mostly invests in things that have very little risk, especially in terms of love and being protective of herself in that way. So not only is Dani relatable, she's also very confronting because I see so much of myself in Dani. It's insane. And so that's definitely why she's one of my favorites. Everything I love about myself, she has. And everything that I may not love about myself, she also has. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel for her. Not only does it make her extremely relatable, but I think it also makes her quite aspirational. Next on my list is Omelogo from Dream Count. Omelogo is who I find to be a lot of people's least favorite character from that book, but I think that she is my favorite. I think also Olana from Half of a Yellow Sun, because I have a very soft spot for women like Omelogo and Olana, in the sense that they are probably people that society would brand as unlikable. There is something quite hard about them, especially upon meeting them for the first time. And oftentimes I find that they are not given the same opportunity to show the entirety of who they are as women, because the initial first contact is quite harsh, if you will. But I love them because they have a strength that the people around them borrow from, especially maybe people around them that are not as outspoken, or people around them who maybe have more of a tendency to people please. They do rely on characters like Omelogo and Olana to really help push their ideas and their own dreams, or to help them in times of need, or when maybe they are the underdog in the situation. Again, I can identify with so many aspects of them, the no-nonsense aspects, the way that they are, I suppose, quite keen to see the world and society for what it is, as opposed to this idealistic version, which, while might temporarily feel nice, is not entirely representative of reality. And I like the fact that they also push boundaries in their own way, and they are deeply loving people if you're willing to dig deeper. I also love Nora from Book Lovers by Emily Henry. She's probably the Emily Henry character that I relate to the most. That inability to sacrifice her own ambitions for love in the way that society expects her to. I loved her love for her sister Libby. It represents a love that I feel for my own sisters. People talk often about how they didn't particularly love how the book centered on the relationship between the sisters, but also I think that book was heavily relatable, because as much as a romantic partnership is important, it doesn't mean that all other relationships in your life cease to exist. And I think it doesn't matter what kind of relationship I might find myself in, my relationship with my sisters will always be important to me. There is no way that I could go on to pursue this dream or have a happy life when I know that my sister is not happy or is struggling in some way, shape or form. If one of my sisters are struggling, I am also struggling. And I could relate to that from Nora. Another one of my favorite characters is Marianne from The Perfect Crimes of Marian Hayes. And she's just one of those women. She's slightly prickly. I love the fact that she is quite strong, and there are a lot of ways in which she's not your typical female character. And I love the fact that instead of the author kind of deriding her or chiding her for it, it's something that's celebrated and something that's highlighted, and it offers a different kind of woman, especially given the time period, because it is a historical romance. She was going through her own struggles in terms of being married to somebody that she ordinarily should not have been married to, and not particularly feeling connected to motherhood or pregnancy and things like traditional sex. I loved what Marianne represented in her character. To me, she's like Dani or Omelogo, in the sense that she may not be the most immediately likable person, but then you get to peel the layers to her, and then you're able to see just how incredible she is. On the back of talking about Nora and Dani, I would also love to talk about their respective partners, Zaf and Charlie. They are some of my favorite characters, again, because they are attached to women who I feel like men and even women sometimes may refrain from building a connection with, or may be intimidated by, and they are not intimidated by these women. They seem to draw so much pleasure from being around these women, from interacting with these women, from being in any kind of relationship with these women, whether or not it's platonic or romantic. And I love that about them, that they never felt threatened by the fact that they were with clearly very successful women. They seemed to revel in the fact that they were with very ambitious, successful women, and it never diminished anything that they were trying to accomplish. And it was great to see just men who are just not threatened by that particular kind of woman. And I think that's also why Charlie and Zaf have made this list, because I think they're just great. I also love Zoya and Inej from Shadow and Bone. Zoya is probably like an unpopular opinion, because I started off not liking Zoya because she was a pain in the ass, and she was very much the kind of girl / woman that I would avoid, because I would be afraid of what she would do in the face of being jealous of another girl, because things happen. But she really grew on me when I read the King of Scars series. By that time, she was Nikolai's right-hand woman in both love and life and his job. And I loved to see that progression from the insecure, jealous girl that she once was to this woman who loved her country so deeply and was willing to defend it at all costs. And again, she was also this pillar of strength for the people around her, and it was quite lovely to see. And then with Inej is the kind of woman that you could easily overlook. It's like she's not very talkative, she's not very boisterous, she's not in your face. That kind of woman is somebody that you could write off as not being strong or being in the background. But you realize that when you remove her from the equation, all the things fall apart, because she is the bedrock and she is extremely competent and she is willing to do the things that she needs to do in order to achieve a certain goal. And so with Inej, I love her because she's so quietly strong and quietly competent, and there is a real sort of steely energy that comes with her, but it's not in your face, and it's something that you probably have to be looking for in order to see. And I really like to acknowledge people like that, because sometimes I feel like they don't get their flowers. So the next category is, I call them dependable men. I found that with books, especially MM romance, I quite like those dependable characters that are so loving, but also maybe a bit more stoic, and people that may be kind of overshadowed by their more boisterous partner. And in this case with Sebastian, I would say Nick from We Could Be So Good and Kit from The Queer Principles of Kit Webb. They are very dependable, competent men. They get shit done. They've come from difficult backgrounds, but have been able to make something of themselves. They are quietly strong. They're people who you could miss the impact of what they bring to a story, but then when you take them out of the equation, again, you can see how much of a hole that they leave behind, because everybody needs them and they are always there for everybody else. And I really loved Nick and Kit for those two reasons. And then the next category I would say is like the silly, boisterous, lovable men. And I think in that regard, we'd have Percy from The Queer Principles of Kit Webb. We'd also have Eddie from You Should Be So Lucky. I would have Ethan from Save of the Game. And then I would also put Ilya from Heated Rivalry and The Long Game. On the surface, they present as quite silly and boisterous and loud. You can't help but laugh at their antics. On the opposite side of the spectrum, these are people that could be taken not very seriously. And then you read the book and you see past the kind of easygoing, silly... I wouldn't even call it necessarily a facade, because it is who they are. But there's more to them than meets the eye. They are more than those silly, ridiculous characters that they present themselves to be. And again, like their more serious counterparts, we can't imagine the book without them. They bring a sort of levity to the story that you need, especially in the face of serious subject matter. My next category are like aspirational characters. These are characters that I feel are quite different from my personality, but I would love to be like them, but I'm just not. I think I would include Anthony from Between the Pipes by J.J. Mulder. I would also have Vass from On the Edge. They are very friendly, the joy of the group. You know, when you meet certain characters and they just have such joy that is so palpable and kind of jumps off the page, and they are so personable, and they are like the social butterflies. Their personalities jump off the page and are very immediately obvious, and they kind of steal the show a little bit. It's not really on purpose. It's not like they're trying to steal the show, but it's just who they are as people. You can't help but notice them in a room. And I think for me, they're quite aspirational in that regard, because I think I'm quite a reserved person, and I'm not the kind of person that would enjoy being in the spotlight in that regard and enjoy being the center of everything. And for them, they embrace it, and they do quite well with it, in the sense that they look after the people around them and they make sure that certain people get their flowers, because they take the spotlight that they get and then put it on others, and I think it's sweet. I think my last category would probably be the gentle giants, the ones that I think people tend to miss when talking about their favorite characters, because again, they have more of like a subdued personality and they stray away from the spotlight, but they are so integral to every story that they're in, and they're so quietly important, and I don't want to forget them. I would say Mark from You Should Be So Lucky, Ryan from Tough Guy. I would say Charlie from The Charm Offensive. They have my heart. I just want to wrap them in bubble wrap, and I want to protect them, because they're such sweet guys, and you don't want them to lose that sweetness, because it's just so important to have people in the world like that, because they remind you of just how good people can be. But at the same time, you don't want people to take advantage of that sweetness, because more nefarious characters tend to target people like that and try to take advantage of them. Mark, I would say, is a bit more prickly. So maybe not him. I think maybe more the other three. Ryan, Cohen from Square to the Puck. Cohen is one of my favorites. So between the people I want to just wrap in bubble wrap and not let anyone hurt them and just keep them as sweet as they are, Ryan, Cohen, and Charlie from the Charm Offensive. And then I'm going to add Mark, who I think is very similar but projects as a little more prickly. But I think Mark is also a very, very sweet person. Eddie, who's Mark's partner, could actually be here as well. I'm very much drawn to people like that, and I think that they deserve to not be taken advantage of, but also to not lose that essence of who they are. I'll probably regret this when I watch this back and remember somebody I didn't include, but maybe I can do a video one day about my favorite characters and ranking them. I'll have to figure out how to do a ranking video first, but that would be interesting to do at some point. Next question is, what are some of your favorite series? I'll take anything by Cat Sebastian. So whether that is her London Highwayman series, her The Turner series, Mid-Century NYC, anything by Cat Sebastian I'll take. And luckily for us all, she has managed to create several series, for which I'm very thankful. Also with JJ Mulder, it's the same thing when it comes to her hockey series. I loved Shadow and Bone. I actually even love King of Scars as well. I know people don't really like that one as much, but I really enjoyed it and it's one of my favorites as well. I also loved the Six of Crows duology. I love the Legendborn cycle. Next question is, what is the series you're most excited to finish? Legendborn. I haven't really read very many fantasy series. All the romance series I've read, I've completed, so there's nothing outstanding in that regard. So mostly just Legendborn. I am excited to get back into that world and to finish reading it up, even though I don't think book 3 is the final book. So I think we are awaiting a 4th book. Also, The House in the Cerulean Sea. I haven't read Somewhere Beyond the Sea. That is also another thing that I'm wanting to complete at this time. I already have the book. It's in my physical TBR. I need to get to that. So between Legendborn and House in the Cerulean Sea, I need to get those done. Hopefully that will happen this year. Fingers crossed. Question is, what series are you excited to start? I would love to do the Skyland series by Kennedy Ryan. That has been on my TBR for a very long time, and now that I have Kindle Unlimited and I think all of the books are on there, I would love to do it. I would also love to read the Vicious series by V. Schwab. That is something I've wanted to read for a very long time but I haven't got round to because of the show coming out and everything. I'm very interested in the Bridgerton series. And one of the books is on Kindle Unlimited, so that is something I want to look into. I might also want to do The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. People talk a lot about The Hunger Games, so I'm intrigued. I'm afraid that I won't like something that's clearly adored by so many people. The next question is, what is a book that you predict will be a favorite? Ever since I started looking into classics that I would like to get into, this is a book that I suspect will become a favorite and possibly one of those books that I will say impacted my life in a big way. And I think it will be Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. As much as I am intimidated by classics, I think it's something that I would like. James Baldwin is a very revered author for a reason. And there is a very strong part of me that thinks that I will definitely like his work. I don't want to choose more than one in this particular category, so Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Next question is, what is your favorite book, cover, or special edition? I have to say, I seldom get attached to book covers. I don't know whether I just don't really notice them or it takes a while. But I would say the most beautiful books I have currently, special edition, are TJ Klune's. I have House in the Cerulean Sea. I have In the Lives of Puppets. Look at the sides of those. Those are stunning. I have Under the Whispering Door. And I also, oh gosh, this is a lot. And I also have Somewhere Beyond the Sea. And I love all the colors. If you saw them all together, you can probably guess which book is which. Oh god, I'm not presenting these well. These are actually the Illumicrate special editions. And I just had to get them because I thought that they were so stunning. And I was so struck by how beautiful they all were. This is how you know that I've never done an haul or an unboxing a day in my life. So that's Somewhere Beyond the Sea. Look at the sides, stunning. And then you see the actual book. Like, look at that. Look at that. That's Somewhere Beyond the Sea. And you also have Under the Whispering Door. Look at the back. Look at the side. Look at that. Look at that. Stunning. And then you have In the Lives of Puppets. Look at that. Look at the back. Look at the front. Show you the insides. Look at that. Look at that. And then last but not the least, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea. That's the back. That's the gorgeous side. And then in it, you have the house, which is so sweet, and like the forest where they would all spend time. Those are, I think, the most beautiful books in my collection. The next question says, if you could buy a book now, what would you get for fun? I would get a Penguin classic. You know those cloth-bound Penguin classics? They are so stunning to look at. I went into Waterstones the other day and I was like, the only reason why I didn't buy it is because I thought it would be a really, really irresponsible financial decision to blindly buy a classic without knowing whether or not I would like it. And so I obviously refrained from doing so. And I think just based solely on the aesthetics of it all, I would buy a Penguin classic for fun. But I won't because I actually have financial responsibilities. So till I read them and I know which ones I love enough to have on my shelf, then I'll buy it. Next question says, what is your favorite bookish merch or shop? It would probably be Lumicry and Fairy Loot because I follow quite a lot of creators that love them and we're subscribers to their various boxes, and they have quite beautiful things, and I love watching their unboxing videos because the items are beautiful. That was the last question. Thank you so much to Jackie from the Reading Wordsmith for including me and tagging me to do this. Like I said, I'm somebody who really enjoys doing tags and I find them extremely fun, and I love the fact that they make me confront my own taste and ask me questions that I just wouldn't consider if I wasn't actually answering certain prompts. And I think they provide insight into me and my reading taste and why I like the things that I do. So I'm so deeply appreciative for being tagged. Also so curious about your answers to some of these prompts. What are your favorite books? Why do you love them? Even if you are not comfortable writing a comment, I would appreciate even like an emoji left down below. Thank you so much for watching. I would appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, as it helps with visibility for my channel. Thank you so much for your time and your patience, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.